Hey y'all, welcome to a new What's for Dinner. First up, I made these grilled cheese chili dogs. These were super fun, super delicious, cheap to make, and really quick to throw together. Now that the kids are out on summer break and in t-ball and softball, we are just not home near as much, so fast meals like this are a must. So the first thing that I did was grab a block of sharp cheddar cheese, and I'm gonna be shredding it myself. These great value blocks of cheese is like an absolute staple in our house. I have it in my fridge at all times, and I use it for so many different things. It's definitely the cheaper option, and it just melts better, and I think it tastes better. But I am still guilty of buying like the pre-shredded cheese already in the bag sometimes. I just like the convenience, but for this particular recipe, I definitely wanted it like freshly shredded. And I wanted to tell you guys where I saw this idea to make the grilled cheese chili dogs. I saw it on TikTok from this guy, and his username is John Eats Cheap. I will have his video in my description box so that you guys can go and watch it. But I sent that video to Josh, and he was like, yeah, we're going to need that ASAP. But moving on, I have this pack of ballpark bun size beef hot dogs. That's what I buy 90% of the time. But of course, just use your favorite kind of hot dogs. And I decided to air fry those. If you have never cooked them this way, you've got to try it at least once. They turn out so good. And I just cooked those at 400 degrees, anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes. And while those were cooking, I went ahead and grabbed a can of chili. The Hormel No Beans is another one of our favorite staples that we always have. But I'm just getting that dumped out and moved on over to my stovetop to start heating it up. The next thing I did was butter up some bread, and I always have room temperature butter out on my counter at all times, ready to go for anything. And I just keep it in that little butter dish over there to the left, and of course I keep it covered up when I'm not using it, but I've only been doing that for maybe a year now, and boy is it life-changing. But to my hot skillet, I'm just going to place my bread butter side down so that it can start to get nice and golden brown, and now I'm just going to start sprinkling that shredded cheese over the top. So if you decide to make this, you don't want to go overboard with the cheese because you are going to be doing this for both sides of the bread. But once it starts to get nice and melty, I'm just going to remove that to a separate plate, and I'm just going to repeat that process until I have enough to feed my family. But I only wanted to do 2 at a time because if I overcrowd the pan, I start to mess things up. But as you can see, I'm now placing the hot dogs down. I did 2 hot dogs per slice of bread, and like I said, I do buy the bun size hot dogs, but if you wanted it to fit perfectly, just buy the normal pack and it will fit just right. But I've got the tops added now. I've removed it to a cutting board, and I'm just cutting those down the middle, and now you have the perfect size to dip in a hot bowl of chili. How good does that look? I thought this idea was just genius. 2 of our favorite things combined into one, so as you can imagine, it was a huge hit and will most definitely be a repeat, and we just had it with a Caesar salad. Up next, I made one of our favorite casseroles, and that is this pork chop and creamy rice bake. It is the absolute best and definitely one of our favorite meals to have at home. So here I just have 4 pork chops laid out, which is the perfect amount for my family. These are those Uncle Charlie's pork chops that I was bragging about in my last dinner video that just always come out so tender, so much different than anything I've ever bought at a supermarket. I don't know what they do, but they're just so good. But I'm just getting those seasoned with some salt, pepper, onion, and garlic powder, which to me is just the perfect blend of spices for basically anything, in my opinion. But I'm just getting those added to my hot skillet that had a couple tablespoons of olive oil in it, and I'm just getting that other side seasoned. So the goal here is not to cook these pork chops all the way through because these are going in the oven for quite a while. I am just wanting to create a sear on both sides, so I just did a minute per side at a high temperature. So now I'm just getting those transferred to a 9x13 baking dish, and I didn't spray it with anything. You shouldn't have any problems with anything sticking. Once I got those added back to that skillet that I fried the pork chops in, I'm just dumping out 2 cans of cream of chicken soup. You could do cream of mushroom if you wanted to, but we don't care for that, so I'm just sticking with the cream of chicken. And now I'm just measuring out 1.5 cups of milk. I use 2%. And then I'm just taking some dried rosemary, and I'm just kind of eyeballing it. I didn't go heavy-handed though. And I'm also going to do a little bit of thyme. When I first started using like both of those spices, I didn't really care for them at first, but over time I've came to like really appreciate the flavor that it adds, and I don't mind it at all now. But once I got that all mixed together, I added in 1 cup of long grain white rice that I did wash first, and my skillet's on about medium heat right now, and I'm just gonna melt down 4 tablespoons of butter. The original recipe does call for a full stick of butter, but I do like to cut that in half, and I still think that it turns out great. So once that melted down completely into the sauce, I just poured that evenly over the top of the pork chops and got that tightly covered with tin foil. Now I'm just gonna pop that in the oven at 275 degrees for 2 hours. For the sides, I'm just going to take this can of peas and heat it up on the stovetop with a little butter, salt, and pepper. And I'm going to cook this cheesy garlic bread in my air fryer. So this is what that casserole looks like once you plate it up. I do like to top it with a little bit of dried parsley just so that it doesn't look so bland, just to add some color to it. But that rice turns out so fluffy and flavorful and creamy. Same with the pork chops. They just turn out so tender. And I love like the cream of chicken that goes over top of it. I promise, if you serve this to guests, they will not leave without asking you for this recipe. It is seriously so simple but delicious. The next night was another really quick dinner, and that was these cheeseburger wraps. Cheeseburgers is one thing that all 4 of us can almost always agree on, so this was just a fun way to switch it up a little bit. I have been trying to finish off this package of burrito tortillas, so that was kind of my inspiration for this meal. So I started by laying down a slice of sharp cheddar cheese on the bottom, and I did that so that when that side of the tortilla hits the skillet, it will melt that quickly. Then I added on a cooked hamburger patty, and I just cooked those in a cast iron skillet. I seasoned it with that super blend seasoning, and anytime I cook hamburgers, I always use lots of Worcestershire sauce. I love the flavor that adds. And the last time that I found ground beef on sale, I pre-patted the hamburgers out and then froze them in between like parchment paper so they wouldn't stick together. So that made this even faster. I just had to thaw out the meat and throw it in the pan. So now I'm just adding the toppings that I like. I have some pickles, lettuce, and this spicy mayo caught my eye. I found it at Target. Never seen that before, so I wanted to try it out. And I'm also just going to add on some mustard. As for the spicy mayo, I have been really liking it on like anything hot, just like this. But like cold sandwiches and stuff like that, or wraps, cold wraps, I don't really care for it as much. So that's just kind of my thoughts on it. But as you can see, I'm just folding this up. I just brought like the sides of the tortilla towards the middle, and it folded up pretty nicely. I just got those transferred to a hot skillet that has been sprayed with some olive oil spray. I also sprayed the top of the tortilla as well. My skillet's on about medium-high heat, and I just cooked that for a couple of minutes on each side. So we ended up loving these. I have made these before with like the meat chopped up, which is also really good, but we did prefer it this way because everything stayed together much better, and it was so much easier to fold like this. Also, of course, you can customize this in so many different ways to make it your own. The options are endless, and as you can see, I just served this with a side of tater tots, and then I have some ketchup to dip everything into. The next night, I made some fried chicken tenders. It has been a pretty long time since I have made these, but they are always a favorite, and we love using the leftovers for like salads, wraps. They're just good to have on hand. And I also made some Instant Pot collard greens as one of the sides, so I'm going to be sharing both of those recipes. So as for the chicken, I'm going to be cooking up this whole package of the chicken breast tenderloins. And the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to remove all of the tendons out of most of them. There was a couple that I couldn't get to, but I just do that using a fork and a napkin, and that removes it really quickly. So that didn't take too much time. And then as for the breading, this isn't normally how I make my fried chicken tenders, but that chicken breading seasoning mix was sent to me, and I definitely wanted to be sure to use that up. I did make one other video using this with fried pork chops, and it is really good stuff. It's seasoned amazingly, and I just have the dry mix in one bowl, and then I do what the package says, and you just take some of that mix and you mix it with water, and that is what that wet mixture is. So I'm just getting these rolled around in the wet mixture first and then making sure they're coated really well in the dry, shaking that off really well. And I'm going to put that in my deep fryer baskets and I let those fry in the hot oil for 3 minutes and drain them on paper towels. Super easy. So now onto these collard greens. I have my Instant Pot turned onto the saute function, and as soon as my screen read hot, I dropped in a little bit of olive oil and I'm going to throw in this whole 6-ounce package of country ham pieces. I'm just kind of breaking it apart with my hands, and this was the cheapest option for country ham. It's a little bit cheaper than buying it like in the slices, so just wanted to throw that out there. But I just let those cook for about 5-6 minutes, I would say, and I'm gonna season these with some onion powder. But if you like actual onion, dice you up one and cook it with the country ham. You could also do like a couple slices of bacon with the ham, but I didn't really feel the need to do that. So here I just deglazed the bottom with a little bit of chicken broth, and that released everything from the bottom, all the flavorful bits. And then I added in a cup of chicken broth for the greens, also a 1/3 cup of apple cider vinegar, a couple tablespoons of brown sugar, and just a small amount of some crushed red pepper flakes. So now I'm going to go ahead and add in the shredded collards. I have these left over from a different recipe that was in my last video. It was a quiche, so that was kind of why I made these. I didn't want those to go bad. But I just added my lid, got my valve set to sealing, and I let those cook for 5 minutes, and then I did a natural release. So here's everything plated up. That chicken turned out perfect. It was super juicy, crunchy, and flavorful. I just have a little side of barbecue sauce to dip those in. The collard greens also turned out really good. They were nice and tender. The country ham and vinegar flavor really popped out, which I really liked. And then I also served this with a side of box shells and cheese. And the only thing I do different with mine is I add in a little bit of heavy cream just to like kind of keep it creamy and to help keep it from drying out. But this meal was so, so good. I have been craving pasta lately, so I wanted to try out something new to us, and this is a Tuscan chicken pasta. So I started by heating up some olive oil in my Dutch oven, and once it was nice and hot, I laid down my chicken, and this is 2 chicken breasts. I just took one of the bigger ones and sliced it in half to make it 3 pieces, and all the seasoning that is on there is just some kosher salt, lots of black pepper, and some Italian seasoning. So basically, I just cooked that until there was no longer any pink, of course, and I remove that to a separate plate. So back to the Dutch oven, I'm going to melt down about a tablespoon of butter, and I'm just throwing in a big spoonful of minced garlic. So I'm just going to let those 2 things cook together for about a minute, and then I'm going to add in a small amount of chicken broth, or you can use some white wine if you have it, to again just deglaze the bottom. Then I'm going to add in a teaspoon of oregano and a small pinch of some crushed red pepper flakes. I'm throwing in some tomato paste that I had in my freezer, and that is going to, thaw out and thicken this pretty quickly. I almost forgot to add this, or else I would have added that in before the chicken broth, but it's all good. So once that reduces down, you are going to measure out 2 cups of chicken broth. I am using a lower sodium version, and I'm also going to add in 1 1/4 cups of some half and half. The next step is to add in some sun-dried tomatoes. So I've already went ahead and cut those up off camera, but you do need a 1/3 cup of those, and that's pretty new to us. I've only cooked with those one time before, and we ended up loving them, so I was really excited to add that to this dish. So once that comes up to a boil, you're just going to add in a 1/2 pound of any pasta that you want to. I went with penne pasta, and you're just going to cook that according to the box directions, but I did have to add on a few minutes because it was just taking longer to cook for whatever reason. And you definitely want to be sure to come in and stir it every now and then. But while that was cooking, I went ahead and cut up the chicken. I cut up some spinach, and I shredded some fresh Parmesan cheese. So here we are after that pasta is perfectly cooked, and I'm just adding in about a cup of that Parmesan cheese, and I'm just going to stir that until it melts. And then lastly, I'm just going to throw in that spinach and chicken. Going to incorporate that, of course, and I'm just going to let that sit for a few minutes so that the chicken can warm back up and that the spinach can wilt. This turned out so yummy. I love the deep like tomato flavor and the Parmesan flavor. I also really love the spinach and the sun-dried tomatoes throughout. This definitely cured my pasta craving, and I just served it with a side of sourdough bread that I toasted up and added some butter and garlic salt to. So that is all the ideas for this video. I really hope that it can help with your meal planning. If you made it this far in the video, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. I hope that you have an amazing week ahead, and I will be back very soon with a new video. Bye, guys.